Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Going Pro, the Challenges and Rewards. My name is Chad, and I'll be your host today. If you have any questions at any time during today's webinar, feel free to use the live Q&A option at the bottom of your Zoom control screen. Click on Q&A, and you'll see that window pop up. You can feel free to enter that question at any time, and we'll answer all of your questions at the end of today's broadcast. Also, you feel free to use the chat function to not only chat amongst yourselves, but the panelists as well. And then finally, the raise your hand option. If there's a topic or subject that you would like to discuss in even more depth at the end of today's presentation, feel free to use that function and we can bring you into the conversation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenters today, Michael Morisette and Coaty, to present Going Pro, the Challenges and Rewards.
So I'm Mike.
Coaty.
Yeah, we're both GIS analysts at the City of Fayetteville. And yeah, we're talking about our experience with migrating to Pro. And so I thought this was an important first slide to show. I will admit I am a bigger critic of Pro than maybe even others in our office, but it's the reality that it is the future of Esri's desktop GIS, and I just thought it was kind of funny. And these are paraphrases of Jack Dangermond at the Esri conference. I remember back in 2015 that we were reassured ArcMap is not going away. And then I remember hearing a couple of years later, we're going to be phasing it out. And then just recently in the last year, we saw the Esri blog that, yes, it is being phased out at the moment. But it's important to note that, they are telling the truth of that it isn't going away. It's just going to stop being supported eventually.
Yeah, you'll always have online support resources.
Yeah. But you can see the general timeline is the software support will end February 2024. That's when they're going to stop releasing patches and stuff. You'll still be able to get phone support up until February 2026, and then after that point, it will go to web resources, which it's basically help yourself at that point. But yeah, that's the status of, to my best of my knowledge, where ArcMap is right now.
So end of life. Time to move on. So if you get ahead of it, good on you.
Yeah.
So as we move forward, we're going to hit these 4 topics: map project design, administration, third-party integration. We're going to do how we use it in the daily use and see some of the analysis gains that you've gotten out of Pro.
So the very first thing I noticed about Pro, and I'm sure anybody else that's opened it, is you're no longer just having a single map. It's a project. And we found that immediately. I thought, oh, wow, this is great, because a lot of our workflow is project-based. I give the example here of I had to update our building safety inspection zone layer for our one of our planning staff. And if this were ArcMap or a catalog, I'd be creating a folder, a geodatabase, a map document, and the Pro just does all that. You just create a new project and it creates all that for you. So and this was way back in 2014, I think, whenever I first looked at Pro, and it's been a long time before I've actually started using it daily, but that was an immediate benefit I noticed. I thought that was something to point out.
And I remember back in college doing the whole term, like having that first couple of weeks be folder structure, getting your nested file structure. So this is kind of doing that for you.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to mention too. So I found this to come very handy is you can still go back to ArcMap or ArcCatalog for most, if it's just a normal feature class or table. Some of the newer features of Pro end up being kind of only Pro, like you can't even read them in ArcMap, and some of those are like utility networks, there are new annotation layers, and there's a couple
they
of
make
things
a list
too.
of things.
But yeah,
some of the things, if you even open it in Pro, it starts to it doesn't go back. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But when we get to project design, so Pro opens as a project, and within it you can make maps and layouts and kind of reference the same thing over and over. So one of the benefits of that is when I make a map layout, I can reference one map in each of these layouts as I'm making them. And I make one change in the map, and it's going to be reflected in each of them. So that's time saver. I don't have to open up each of my ArcMaps that I'm creating, each of those different layouts, and update that same layer as I'm changing it from red to blue or something. Also, when I'm working in a project, the nice thing is that I don't have to have every single layer that I could possibly use in the same table of contents. Instead, I can kind of separate out things based on tasks. So I'll create a map and I'll focus it in on like, okay, I'm going to do these couple of things. So I need to have parcels in there, building structures and address points, but I don't necessarily need the trail network and the railroad. And in ArcMap, we would create group layers, and I'd have to go through those and turn them on and off, set up my projects, my map as I'm needing to make the changes. So it's kind of a time saver just being able to click through the maps for a more focused look. So yeah, maps and layouts, kind of a nice design. One of the most imposing, scary things about Pro is getting used to this ribbon. It's not a toolbar anymore, right? So the ribbons, got a couple of sections. The first section always opens up to is this map section. If you got a map open, you got the ability to pan to it, kind of get your settings right. You're always adding your data. You can bring in your base maps if you're signed into ArcGIS Online or our portal. And you're just kind of getting it feel right. Now, if you're looking for the find tool, it's hidden in that explore word right there. That's your binoculars. Your identify.
That's your identify, yeah.
It's a hidden thing. Awkward. The insert, this is where you're actually going to create your new layout. It does get awkward in Pro because you're looking at the table of contents. You're like, how do I get a new layout? It doesn't list layout in that table of contents until you actually added a layout from here. It does that with server connections and a couple of other things. So you go to insert to get these extra things in your catalog. Analysis, there's some cool tools, but there's also something I'll touch on later that allows you to make tools on the fly that are not like producing an output, they're just producing a layer. View is just opening up your panes. If you accidentally close something, you can get it back in the view. The edit session, I spend most of my time every day in this guy. You really can use this to do everything you need to do. If you're just generally editing like an addressing layer, keeping up with your 911 maintenance, you got all your selection sets, your splits, your whatevers, and you'll see there the save and discard. That's your edit session. So in Pro, those kind of things are always, they're defaulted to be on once you start editing on something. You just kind of click it and you're like, all right, I want to change some vertices. And Pro's like, oh, well, intuitively, you need to start an edit session to do that.
Yeah.
So it starts one for you.
Yeah. I found it really handy. Did you talk about, the edit tool? You can actually, there is a option you can check where it does add a basically start stop editing, which I love that because I love to know when I have the ability to move something or not.
Most of my coworkers have done that.
Yeah.
Imagery for georeferencing. Let's say I get a JPEG in for somebody or I take a screenshot. I'm just going to go to the imagery thing, make sure I have that thing selected in my table of contents, and then it opens up, it like activates the georeference, and I can start doing what I'm used to doing, where I'm going to fit it to my screen and add my control points and stretch it and stuff like that. And share is another little easier thing to use than the file, share as, web service, blah, go through all that. You just like, I need to share this, so you can share it as a print, you can share it as a web layer, a web map. You just start there and go. So ribbons aren't that imposing, but it does take some getting used to.
Yeah, for sure. So the hardware requirements for Pro, they are, it's notable. It's a notable uptick from ArcMap. I'd say in some cases a blessing because it has allowed us to kind of analyze with the 58 desktop users we have, Some might be better served with web maps, and so we've had those discussions, because otherwise, we like to joke about it, but it's almost like having to have a gaming computer to run Pro. You can see their memory requirements. They recommend at least 16 gigs of memory, and they specify dedicated graphics memory. I think this especially comes into play with 3D stuff, but with 2D maps as well. It seems like any less powered machines will struggle trying to run Pro. You don't need a dedicated GPU, but it seems like they almost recommend you get one, which we do have in our machines, and they do run Pro like a champ. We have some nice computers. And then, this was an issue for us right off the bat, especially before we got our new computers. So I've never had a program crash a driver, but Pro somehow manages to do it. So it'll fix it 100% if you just change its rendering engine. So I think in most installs, it'll default to DirectX, and then we switched it to OpenGL, and then no more crashes after that. So it's a great thing to note. So regarding this is another big hurdle with initial installation is just licensing it. Usually the default behavior is you install it on somebody's computer and then they'll say, hey, what's my ArcGIS Online login? And then we have to figure out, either give them a login. So anyways, what we found was the familiar option to us was concurrent licensing. And this, I'm sure, varies by organization, but, us being a more enterprise environment, we found this was just the easiest, seamless. It's the same way we license ArcMap. I thought it was interesting that Pro is its own license, and then this, I think, causes me and others confusion because you hear the terms used interchangeably. Sometimes you'll hear desktop referencing Pro, but in this particular case with licensing, desktop refers to Arc Catalog, what they call the legacy programs, ArcMap, Arc Catalog, ArcScene, and then you need a specific Pro license to be able to license and run Pro. So we just have both in our license manager and can license all our installs.
Esri explains that, saying that desktop incorporates everything, but Pro is the only thing that can be purchased as a standalone license because it's designed to be an all-in-one kit. So you get your catalog and everything built into Pro, whereas everything else is like, hey, I got a little catalog here, I got a little map here, and some web viewers here. They're just all separate entities versus one.
Yeah. And then, I just thought it was worth mentioning, too, in our particular case, too, with having to install things and have them work consistently. I found it easy to just write like a batch script, and I just snippeted it below, or basically it'll install the program, it'll configure licensing, it'll add any portal or ArcGIS Online connections automatically, and then also install any patches or the SQL driver that we need to access our database. So I just found that to really save a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
And then, another big benefit of Pro, because it's built from the ground up to integrate with web content, and we found that to be very handy as we're utilizing web maps more and more at the city. Stuff like metadata, pop-up configurations, your thumbnails, you can all save that in your Pro project. So then every time you republish your service, if you change something, you don't have to redo your web map every time. But you're finding that have to do with ArcMap. And I just gave that example screenshot below of how you can just, your Pro pop-up that you'd see with your identify tool becomes your web map pop-up. And then another big benefit of Pro is the ability to use the new shared instance pool of server. So starting with server 10.7, they instead of having to have a process and a SOC for every service you publish, it's now all part of, well, you can set it the default either way, but you can have it be either its own process or part of a dedicated or a shared instance pool. And they only let you do this with Pro. The server manager will know where your service is published from, and they only let you check this option if it's a Pro service. So it's something, a reason. We've moved now, at this point, pretty much all of our web content is Pro, if nothing else, for this reason alone. And then just outside of sharing web maps, just in general, I found that Pro integrates a lot nicer with web content than ArcMap does. Like, because we're adding our portal and ArcGIS Online to all of our user installs, once they log in, and we have it set up too where we have Active Directory integration, so they log in with their city login, and then they automatically get all of our portal content. So if they want the zoning layer in a print map that they're making, and they want it to look just like our web maps, they can do that. They can just search for zoning and add it in. And then this extends beyond just portal. This could be any, ArcGIS Online content across the web.
Once you're in with this, you just kind of toggle whether you want to be on your ArcGIS Online account or you want to use your portal account, and that just switches up your portal versus ArcGIS Online content viewer here in catalog. Yeah. Gets a little murky for somebody just trying to get used to it.
Yeah, it's a little bit much.
So what we found with some of the third-party integration is that 911 still runs on ArcMap. So ArcPro, you can have all your maps, you can have vector tile packages, you can have all this really cool fancy stuff that you're bringing in. You got to really push to set it up for that. But in the end, they're still going to say, yeah, can you also get us an ArcMap? Because the tool won't work unless you do. It tends to be a recurring thing.
Yeah. So yeah, on that note too, like you said, is this a theme with third-party applications? And so far, our answer is yes. So our other big enterprise system we implemented was our Central Square EAM, formerly known as Lucidity. And yeah, they do advertise support for Pro, but not for us. I mean, I mean, this screenshot is literally our experience with both. Use their split tool in ArcMap, flawless. Use it in Pro, you will get one error message after the other. And then what's even scarier is sometimes it'll say split successfully in Pro, but then it really didn't, and then you end up with corrupted data. So unfortunately for now, that we're still stuck on ArcMap for doing any sort of edits on feature classes tied to our asset management system.
And this is at a stage where I've almost completely migrated to Pro, and I'll be making my edits, and then I have to open up my other side map, an ArcMap, and just kind of touch it and say, yeah, these are good. Then it gets a little frustrating.
So this is probably the last major web thing I had ported. This was honestly about a month ago. We have a suite of base maps with all of our city web maps that we and our users really like, and so we wanted to maintain that. And they're pretty cumbersome to maintain, especially when ArcMap isn't showing. They're set up basically every feature class at every scale has there's a layer. So you want to change the color of the street center line, you'd be doing that 10 times or more. I thought so. With Pro has skill-based symbology. That was a amazing thing that they implemented. You can change the size of your lines and the size of point symbols as well, all based on the scale that you're currently zoomed at. So in our particular case, I went from having most layers, it's only one layer now for our web maps, but in some cases like streets, I ended up having to do two because we do like cartographic collapsing at smaller scales. But yeah, the gist of it is it's much less cumbersome to maintain now. And then also the ability to use the shared instances, it helps with resources. And Esri in their best practices does specifically mention cached base maps as a good use case for shared instances.
So general editing, find it pretty cool that in Pro you don't have to start and stop edit sessions when you're editing data from two different databases. So if you create a local project on your C drive and then you're also working with some SDE data off your server, I don't have to create my junk line and then stop the edit session, saving the edits, start a new edit session on the SDE data and start working. I can just have them both going at the same time. So I have some junk data on the right there as I'm putting in a new subdivision, and I have our data on the left there, and I can just, move vertexes to get some connectivity, kind of prep the data as I go and then just save all edits at the end. And important to keep reminding you, you do have the option to impose those start and stop edit sessions on yourself. Pop-out windows make the project a much more usable feature. I found that in Pro, I like to be able to use other windows while I have another window in my primary view. So if I open up a dialog box, I can still go and open up another dialog box and start comparing how I ran one tool to another so I can prep my settings. So my greatest example of this is symbology. So I can open up symbology and then still work with something else. In fact, here I am doing symbology and running a processing tool at the same time. The other cool thing with this geoprocessing thing is I can queue up tools. If you see that plus sign next to expand in the right side, I can start this tool and then immediately start building my next tool, and it will just queue them up, and I can just run them back to back. When one finishes, the next one will begin, and I'll get my results and stuff. They don't even have to be related to each other. Then a cool benefit here on the bottom with the purple and the blue is the ability to offset lines in symbology. It gives me a new symbolic choice. So we're used to seeing case lines when you want to see roads, but I might want to see, without having those arrows on there, the direction my line is going. And so I do that by having 3 different colors of road with a dark purple on the left and a light purple on the right. And I do that with all my colors. So blue, green, and that's not something that I can do in ArcMap. This is just a cool little bonus with ArcPro. I got that smooth scrolling. It decelerates and accelerates as I'm zooming in.
It does, yeah.
It feels really.
I think it has anti-aliasing by default too, so your lines are jagged.
Yes.
ArcMap, yeah.
Every time I go back to I like to keep ArcMap white and ArcPro black, so I can tell when I'm working with one. And it's just like, yeah, this needs to go to the next level when I go back. So things missing in Pro, there's an article that you can go to. Just do a quick search for like feature tools that are missing in Pro. And they've got several that haven't been pushed forward.
I will say too, I mean, I don't have that list, but then I've just found, I think because it is a newer program still, it's a little rough around the edges. So like one instance I've had, like where I mentioned where I have to switch back to catalog just for one task will be like when I'm doing metadata, like it will automatically populate all the field types in catalog, but not in Pro for some reason. I don't know if it's a bug or intended behavior, but it's just something to note that there may be a few things that are still missing from Pro, whether advertised or not.
I'm going to call that pre-texting.
Yeah.
So when I do Network Analyst in Pro, it's not like searching for field names and intuitively putting those times into my network. It kind of feels sandboxy, I have to build each feature and parameter and evaluator throughout the whole thing. Whereas if I go to ArcMap, if I just have fields named a certain thing, it will like populate my one-ways and populate my time field and my different cost enablers in my network, so I keep going back to ArcMap to run network analysis because it knows what I want to do without me having to spend all that time on it. So what's this? That's an ArcMap symbol. Oh, I can't seem to get to the next. Hold on. Maybe if I'm going to close that. ArcMap versus ArcPro. Okay, so analysis memory. In ArcPro, a lot of these tools that you're running have the ability to do parallel processing, which is using more of your cores. So it's one thing when you open a tool, just go check the environments and see if you can do this parallel processing. So if I had 16 cores and I told it to use 75% of them, it would run 75% of those cores. Otherwise, it's just going to use the default things, and you can get some better speeds on.
Multi-threaded is a big benefit for heavy analysis as well.
I did see it cut a lot of time when I was doing a tree canopy study. Speaking of which, this NDVI and NDVI colorized, These things are called raster functions, which are built into Pro's analysis ribbon. You click one of those, and what it creates is a layer that's calculating on the fly every raster cell. It's not creating an output. It's just got this temporary thing. You can be like, all right, I want to see what's in my visual extent here. If it was NDVI, you just click the button and it runs a couple of tools, gives you an output, and you're like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm going to keep that. Then you export it as a raster, you're good. So those are kind of quick to use, and so I really like that feature.
So I do a lot of work with Python scripting to automate a lot of our procedures as much as we can. And I think the biggest difference to note, if you don't already know it about ArcMap or Catalog versus Pro, is that the ArcMap and our Catalog utilize Python version 2, and ArcGIS Pro utilizes Python 3. And I think it's equivalent parallel in that, like you probably heard that Pro is the future of ArcGIS desktop, and Python 3 is the future of Python. It's where all new development is occurring, new functionality, etc. And then, just one thing, if you do any Python, you probably know this already, but just the simple print statement, that was by far the biggest thing I had to update in all my scripts. Was just all you have to do is just enclose it in parentheses. And even the error message the Python interpreter gives you is actually very nice too. You can see it just tells you, hey, put parentheses around it, and then you're good to go.
It doesn't just say error in line 151.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily it. I mean, if there, one of the big module differences with ArcPy is the mapping module is no more. It's been superseded with the MP module to go along with the whole concept of editing a map versus now you're editing a project with that. So it's important to keep that in mind. There are going to be other differences you'll come across, the major ones. And then also, they've improved. Python was well supported with ArcMap, but I think it's even better supported with Pro. They build it right into the GUI. You can see here, you can manage your environments, which is what we do. So if we distribute any, say, toolbox tools across the city, which we have in a couple instances, you can get all the prerequisites on the user's machine, in just a few clicks without having to do like a pip install or do any command line or folder copying. It's all just kind of built in. So I found this to be pretty handy in most cases.
Yeah, that was a quick thing. Now, on our last slide here, Arcade is designed to function the same across the ArcGIS platform. So this is a weird little proprietary language that they put in, and it's supposed to make it so that you can write something in Arc Pro, and it will be the same as it is in the web. So you don't have to change it, and you just can have that reliable functionality across
the platform.
Yeah,
that's the buzzword.
With Pro though, Visual Basic is gone. So if you're planning to import all your maps, and you maybe have been like a first level or a lower level user, and you built all these expressions in ArcMap, everything defaulted to Visual Basic, and it's likely that all of your expressions were written in Visual Basic, and you'll have to convert those over to Python as you're bringing your maps into Arc Pro. I had to deal with this when I was migrating to prepare my data for more of an Arc Pro feel as I'm getting into 911 with Tyler's New World Public Safety. So I had to update all my expressions to Python and my queries to Python, my symbol queries, my symbol, the G. I had code that was making a full name on the fly. And so that was a layer of work that you take on as you make this switch. Really cool to note about Arcade is that the language will allow you to evaluate data so that you're not just having to point it at information that is already there. So you can reference a column that is being built in Arcade. So thanks for listening to our presentation. I've got Coaty here, and
Morisette?
yeah, we're good to go.
All right. Excellent presentation. Thank you guys so much. There are a couple of questions. I'm going to try to go in the order I remember seeing these pop in. So the first one actually from Stephanie was, how hard has it been to update scripts and models from Pro to Map?
I wouldn't say too terribly hard. I mean, I don't personally do a lot with models. I actually was kind of just trained off the bat at Python. So, but yeah, in terms of that, it was like I had shown, it was mostly just that print statement was I had to update. And then, yeah, a lot more work had to be done with anything that we were doing, like map automation. And my work isn't done there yet. We still do have some tools floating around that use ArcMap. So
the models will carry forward from the legacy system. Esri does say on their website that they've improved the model experience, that they've made it better. And I've had the opportunity to work with it. I've done some things, and it's clean and it's nice because it just shows us a little window right there, and you can touch everything while you're touching it. But it won't go back. So if you make a model in Pro, it's not going to be able to be read in ArcMap.
That's a common theme with anything Pro is layer files. Another thing, if you make a layer file in Pro, it's not going to be viewable in ArcMap. And data, everything.
All right. Thank you guys. Another question here from Lindsay. Do you know if you can import DGN or DWG files? I'm assuming into Pro.
I can. I've brought one in. I don't get those very often, but the developers do send some drawing files, and I've got them in. They show up as a big layer with a lot, so it's a group layer, and I get to see each one. I can turn them all on and off. I have noticed performance hit when I'm using them. There is a ton of layers in some of these projects, and they all show up like one big group layer full of 150 layers. So it's.
I mean, that was an issue with ArcMap too.
I would say that's still the same functionality.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry.
No, you're fine. One more here from Greg. Has Esri fixed the ability to save Traverse file when using the Kogo tools?
My goodness, Greg, you're so great. So, so those Kogo, I've been able to save them in my memory, but it has been a while, Greg. So I would say yes.
Read Todd here.
Yeah. That task was given to another coworker, so it's been a few months for me.
That's effectively a punt. So
I'm hearing a no.
My coworkers are saying no. They have that. I know it's a hamburger and then save as Traverse file, and you should be able to save it as text. I've seen that menu. Now, my coworker keeps yelling at my ear.
Yeah.
Does not work. So, but the hamburger is still there.
all right. One more here from James. Does any of your data have a geometric network? If so, how are you handling that with Pro?
No, we've thought about it, and we have come across this conundrum because we've just started to now think about it with some of our utility data. And so yes, we haven't run into this, but my understanding from researching it is, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a geometric network will become read-only in Pro, and then if you make the utility network in Pro, then ArcMap can't even read it. So this is a common theme I've come across with more advanced functionality is you have to pick one. And so we're not there yet where we have every computer in the city upgraded to Pro, so we can't make a call there yet.
Yeah, it seems like something where you're going to be playing with both. There are games in Pro, but there are certain things that if you've got them going in ArcMap, it's gonna feel painful if you try to make that migration.
Yeah.
And partial fabrics and geometric networks sound like those two things that are probably painful.
Yeah. Another thing was attribute rules versus attribute assistant, and two, they're not interchangeable, unfortunately.
Yeah, you've had to do a lot of custom scripting.
Yeah,
that.
But
Okay, excellent. So this next one is somewhat anonymous. I think the user is probably just signed on online, so it prevents them from posting in the Q&A. But the question, if I'm reading it correctly, is my printing and exporting in Pro is really slow. Usually takes 2 or more minutes to export or send a letter size print. Any suggestions? Opening the project can also be slow. Any suggestions to speed it up?
in terms of the export, it's not something I honestly do a whole lot, but I think possibly reducing at the DP, there's like 2 different quality settings. There's DPI, and then there's, I think it's the image compression. And I thought if you bump that image compression down a little bit, things will usually export a lot quicker and also result in a smaller file size while still being decent quality.
Something that came up back when I was using ArcMap and has been resolved with our new printer. But switching the driver from the Windows driver to the other driver can sometimes just be night and day on your print settings.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, then in terms of project opening slowly, I've split things into more projects. I started with all of our web map stuff. I had it in one project initially, and then as that started to grow, I found it just became really unwieldy like that, where it'd take like several minutes to open. So I think it might be reducing the content in your different projects, or maybe splitting projects into sub-projects might be the solution to that.
Remember doing those maps, it's only going to load the active map. And if you try and adopt a new theme when you're in Arc Pro, where you're breaking stuff up into your tasks. So you can have the same layers in multiple maps, but just design those maps so that you can take care of what you need with the limited amount of resources that you might need. Cool thing about the project is that if you need a new layer in that next map, you can just click on the previous map, grab it from your table of contents, pull it to the new map that you're trying to get into, because they show up side by side like a DWG, and drop it on there, and we'll put it into the table of contents for that map.
Excellent information. All right, one more question here from Jennifer. Do you have problems selecting features when editing? I keep getting a selecting feature, press escape to quit prompt. What about table editing? Problems there too?
Yeah, the selecting feature, press escape to quit, I do get that. You need, that tends to be if you're using the Explore tool, because they've taken the find and the identify and the pan and put them all into one tool. You click on the map and it's like, oh, we're selecting, or are we identifying, or are we, we'll do it all. Now, that does get better after the initial click, because it seems like what Pro is doing is it's holding everything as like a geoprocessing tool. So you have the selection geoprocessing tool. You know, it's doing this thing that takes 10 seconds to function, but it only for that one time. And I feel like that's the time-saving mechanism that it has, is that it doesn't load anything extraneous. So you'll waste a little bit of time on the front end the first time you're using that tool, and then after that it should work just fine. Every time you click something, it's immediate. But try not to use the Explore tool to go clicking on stuff. Instead, switch over to your editor.
Regarding tables, I'll ask the group too. I've not had much luck with tables in Pro in terms of being user-friendly, where you can. One of the biggest jokes we have is that in ArcMap you can kind of catalog, you can scroll through the data and kind of go, oh, okay, there's the value I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. It's like going through a time warp with table and Pro. You don't see the values as you're panning the table. I haven't found that Pro is nicer for tables compared to catalog. That's I would say a weak spot for me.
Yeah, pan everything goes invisible.
Yeah.
All right. Question from Chris. How hard was it for your tech staff to transition from Map to Pro? Did you train in-house, instructor-led training sessions, or some hybrid?
So our supervisor, Greg Reese, he would actually come by our tables and be like, hey, that's neat. Why aren't you using Pro for that? Like, Pro is awkward. And anyways, it was really trial by fire for us. He just kept pushing us to, can you do that in Pro? Can you do that in Pro? It would take us some time, but eventually we got used to the edit session, and that was the biggest hurdle.
I would say for me personally too, I think a different approach with Pro in that it's you use it, you try to use it, and then you do slowly find things you like. And that, so far for me, like I've pointed out, a lot of the web stuff, and I found that if certain tasks I will default to using Pro, and I think it's just that exposure says enough itself. If you just try to use it every day, that helps a lot. I think understand the program more and more.
Just get used to having both ArcMap and Pro open at the same time. And if something needs to be spit out really quick, just throw it on, open ArcMap and start doing it. If something you got a little bit of extra time for, see if you can find that same tool on Arc Pro. You just got to keep doing that. Eventually, it's going to click. We didn't have to do any training sessions. I think just because staff is on a adopt it as you want, but I'll keep asking you about it type method.
Yeah, we've just learned, over time. I think as I would assume this as many people are learning Pro this way that are existing professionals. It's just a slow but steady process.
Speaking of our theory, if we give people Pro first and don't tell them about ArcMap, then we can kind of curtail it as we're going forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's other the users outside of our office at the city that are more less technical GIS users. That's an approach we've taken. As if they've never used ArcMap before, just start people on Pro, and then that'll help me too. I think the more we're immersed in it.
Okay, great. This one from Keith. Can you describe your experience on how IT and GIS lines have blurred, and how critical it is to have GIS involved in any enterprise software application from requirements gathering through implementation?
It's in our particular case, it is we're finding that our GIS database is the central database, you could say, that kind of feeds all these different systems, 911, permitting, community development, asset management, utility billing.
Starting to feel almost Boolean. Does it exist in GIS? No, doesn't exist.
Yeah. But we're finding that more and more. Honestly, I've only worked here 7 years, and in that time, it's gone from almost no integration to pretty much almost complete integration with our different enterprise systems.
So with that, we've been surprised by some things sometimes, and then we have to figure out how to integrate with it. So I would say we are strongly becoming like an IT software.
Yeah. And it's nice. I like knowing, we have our geodatabase. Cool. How can you do more with it? And because it's an enterprise geodatabase that runs on SQL Server, so we're finding we're interfacing more with our, more technical, staff with that, and we're getting cross training, and because essentially at the end of the day, our database, it's all it is. It's just a database with a geometry field. If you look at SQL Server, so it's.
Yeah, we're just here translating it to the different utilities that need it, or different entities. Like somebody might want a list of our streets, right? We can either give that to them. We have to know all the different formats we can give that to them. We can write a SQL query, or we can give them an Excel spreadsheet. But it's all, database, turning it into useful outputs for everyone in any way that they might need it. So yeah, we are becoming software specialists.
Okay, looks like the last one here from Brian. Are you all updating Pro frequently, i.e. are you at 2.8 yet or moving every user at once?
So I believe both. I think within our office, we're just freely upgrading as we see fit. Officially for the city, I support what Esri considers all the long-term releases. So it's right now it'd be 2.7.1. That's the one that I default to installing, unless there's some reason otherwise. But I just found that just that .1 release is always going to be more stable. You're not going to have the bugs and crashes quite as much, just with any Esri product, especially server. But yeah, with Pro as well, I tend to apply that.
And as I go and I call Esri tech support because our Pro is not functioning well, or it's going into a crash state or breaking my memory card, I find that when I update, my problems go away. So
Oftentimes, yeah, more often than not, yeah.
So if you are in a state where it's failing, try the upgrade.
Yeah, I apply that philosophy to a lot of stuff online. Yeah, it's just if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's broke, fix it. Try something new. Yeah, that's another good opportunity for what I've just gone to Pro too. Is if that tool's being a pain in my side in ArcMap, and I'll try it in Pro, and oftentimes it'll work in Pro. So there's some other bug out, that it might be fixing.
All right, excellent. Looks like we've exhausted all of the questions that have been posted. I guess we'll open things up to our panelists. If you guys have any questions or any interaction, now is your opportunity.
Hey, Chad, if I could just make a comment, and I want to thank these gentlemen for sharing their expertise and their experience. I think it's very important for others to hear kind of how you're dealing with the use of this technology. I did appreciate some of your coworkers kind of chiming in with some questions. It was a little bit loaded softball there. Greg, I'm calling you out, buddy. But really, the experience you guys have is awesome to share. And I'm glad that you took the opportunity and volunteered to share with us. And I just want to make a comment. I hear a lot of people that haven't really jumped into Pro yet, and they start, but they're a little concerned it's slow and it takes a little bit to export something or to load data. It seems like, from my perspective, that problem kind of goes away pretty quickly as you begin to use it. And I started out using Pro with really only a laptop with 4 gig of RAM. And I got to the point where I was, getting things done quicker because it was 64-bit versus 32-bit.
Yeah.
And I don't have the fastest of machines, but I am working with 16 gig of RAM, and it's like butter now.
Yeah.
I wondered if that was the same experience you guys had, and I'll shut up and go away.
Yeah. Pro right now makes ArcMap feel very slow. So I load it up, I get some pop-ups that are like, hey, check your certificates and stuff because I'm using other people's servers. But once those go away, I can pan and zoom and it's real smooth. Everything feels, as you said, like butter. It's just, but when I go back to ArcMap, it's kind of choppy and I'm having struggles, and it's just.
I see that less, but I also use Pro less than you do. That's for my day-to-day stuff. But so yeah, I think you're onto something there that maybe you look past, or even maybe it is just your imagination that it's slower and clunkier. I'll never get past the ribbon. I joke about that because it was in Office 2007, is that when they introduced it, and I still hate it to this day. I think it's a horrid interface, but it's here to stay, so you gotta get used to it. But I'd much rather have menus and toolbars. I mean, that's a lot less clicking, I feel, but yeah, we get used to it.
That's cool, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for your insight.
We had an interesting situation the other day with Pro. We were trying to download some rasters using ArcMap from an outside source on their server. Everything worked good till I go to print or to export to any other file, and the rasters went away. The solution was to use Pro, and it actually worked. So
Okay.
if you're having trouble doing that, that may be an option. Was kind of a weird deal.
Yeah.
That is a weird deal. I've seen that go both ways.
I've seen
The other
it,
way.
we've seen it the other way in our office where Pro won't display raster data sometimes. And I found in our case too, it was that one setting made a difference. The same thing that causes crashes or not causes crashes on some hardware will also fix that. So
We've also seen where it's not WYSIWYG. So we set up a map and then we go to print and it's showing us what it's going to print. And then what we get is different.
yeah, that's the common, especially with raster data. I saw that was a common occurrence for us. But
So yeah, get used to using both softwares until they've figured it out.
yeah, I think it's good to have and keep both in your toolbox, so to say. That's my personal take.
I find the hardest thing, and I use Pro consistently now. I've changed over all my classes. Last year, I stopped teaching ArcMap, and I feel a little bit like that's dangerous because I'm sending students out into the world with just Pro knowledge, and all the old timers are not going to know how to interface with them.
Oh yeah.
But I worry, like the problem I have with Pro is all this muscle memory that I have with ArcMap. So when I'm in a layout, I can, in ArcMap very quickly move things around. But in Pro, because symbology is all different, because how you interact with the legend is different, I can't just double click on it, resize it, and move it how I want. And that is super annoying to me. And so I hope that they work in that area. I did just read that there's not going to be a 2.9 a 10.9 in.
Yeah, that's correct. They've released server 10.9,
Right.
but not ArcMap 10.9.
Right,
so.
and Enterprise 10.9, but not
Yeah.
not ArcMap specifically. And they basically said they're not going to. And so 2.8 in Pro is supposed to speed up a bunch of the loading a bunch of features at one time or interacting with tables. So I think those are going to be helpful. But,
Okay, well, that's good to know.
yeah, it's they showed, if you go watch the video that Esri put out, it's wonderful how much faster 2.8 is than 2.7.1. You're right, the .1s are always more stable. So
Yes.
I'm hesitant to install that on all my all my lab computers. But all right, so the question I have, that was a big lead in. In your experience, you had mentioned you basically need to get used to using both for a while. What do you automatically, hands down, want to use Map for and not Pro?
It probably varies by person in the office here. For me, I think of Map as, for me personally, the simple, like editing type tasks is what I still prefer Map for personally. And then anything like web related or analysis or big project thing, I feel that's where Pro really shines. Anything new, you could call it anything new and flashy, I think is where Pro really, which is what you'd expect. I mean, that's what it's developed for where it comes into play. But that's my personal take. I know I believe you find editing better in Pro, right?
The one thing I keep going back to ArcMap is Network Analyst. It is familiar, it populates stuff. I'm going to go back to ArcMap to make my address locators because those are familiar and it finds the fields and populates stuff. And I just don't get that intuitive knowledge with ArcPro. It's not doing the work for me based on my field names. Now, in ArcPro, I'm going to use it for all editing because I can splitting a line, right? If you have one street and it's intersected by 7 streets and you got to split it 7 times. If I do that in ArcMap, I got to click that segment that I want to split, point at the spot I want to split. Then I got to click the new one, split it where I want to split. In ArcPro, I can have 4 segments in a line, 4 pieces all selected, and I can just click, 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 and it's going to be spinning as it goes, and then it will have split all those segments.
Yeah.
Super time saver.
When I used to do I don't do our land records data anymore, but with numbering subdivision lots, you can imagine if it's like a 200 lot subdivision, you go 1, 2, but Pro does have a tool, and I found that was really useful too. I would go, oh, okay, cool. So, and nothing else, I'll switch over to Pro I found myself doing that just to number the lots, to use their new auto numbering tool. But that's where some of the other, maybe what I might call clunkiness, is balanced out by just having new tool functionality.
When I'm exploring raster data, if I just want to look at raster data, I feel like Pro does it more fluidly.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to be loading in imagery and just looking at it, looking for building footprints or something like that, I will be doing that in Pro because it's going to load the imagery faster. It's more intuitive to me how it looks at web services. So if I need to look at our portal content in Pro, that's just sitting there in catalog as another pane. Here's all your organization stuff. In ArcMap, I have to go to that server connection and be looking at that folder structure that we're using for our
Services.
REST services.
Yeah.
And drag in the ones that I want. But Pro's got all those searchable stuff.
Yeah, I thought, Pro, that's what I thought was interesting with Pro is, so you say imagery, I think you're actually pulling in our imagery service, right? Yeah. So that, for some odd reason, somehow that is faster than just pulling in the raster data in Pro, I found. It really displays cached service data really well by comparison to ArcMap.
So yeah, not much I do go back for Mac for.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's helpful. Thank you. I do think all of us that learned in one way, especially the longer we've done it in that way,
Yeah.
are going to be hesitant just because we've got a model. If you got a set of models built, now I've brought models in and they worked sometimes, but if the syntax of the box is different, it doesn't work. So or if the tool is totally rewritten, sometimes it doesn't work. But anyhow, that was all. Thanks.
Yeah, that was cool.
Thanks.
Gotta be careful of that missing Visual Basic scripting too.
All right. Well, if that has exhausted all of the questions today, I would like to extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to Gunn and Mike for an absolutely excellent presentation today. You guys were most wonderful.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. This time I would like to remind everyone to tune in next month on July 21st for our next installment of the Arkansas GIS Users Forum educational webinar series. Also, if you haven't already registered, or if you're looking for more information about the upcoming 2021 Arkansas GIS Symposium and Training, please visit events.argisusers.org. That will conclude today's broadcast. On behalf of the Arkansas GIS Users Forum, I'd like to say thanks to all our attendees for joining today. Have a great rest of the day.